Hey everybody, welcome back to City Church OTR's podcast. My name is Josh, and we are a brand new church in Cincinnati in the historic neighborhood over the Rhine, and we have been having a conversation with Chris and Tyler, the co-pastors. We've got to know them, we've got to know our church, and we're going through all of our values. Those are family, mission, presence, and formation, just so that you can get to know us before we even are able to get to know you. So we're on our last one, which is formation. It's another one that might have a little bit of intrigue, like formation, what am I being formed into? And we're going to unpack that. So I'd love to start with maybe Tyler. We collectively, mostly you two, decided formation number is top 4 value in our church. Why?
We really just stole the word from a title of, I'll say, Beyonce's 4th best song. The top 3. I also know. Okay. I do have a Beyonce song ranking, but that's for another podcast. I think formation is a concept, is this idea of we're always becoming somebody, and we're all in the process of either, one path or another path, looking more like this, looking more like that. Yeah. And so a focus on formation says, hey, it's worth being very aware of both who you are and who you're becoming and what that process looks like. And for us, it'd be worth lining up your path of formation to match the path that Jesus was on, so that over time, you're becoming more and more and more like Jesus. And the reason that's so important to us is because we do think Jesus probably lived the best human life ever, is the epitome of what it means to be fully human, that both in the great glories he experienced, but also in the suffering that he did for others. I mean, just in every dimension of life, it's like, this is life how it was made to be lived. And so we would love if in our church, there's a conscious focus on becoming more and more and more and more like him by following different practices or embracing different steps or, cultivating new kinds of habits that led in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, what are your thoughts? Because I think this one in church world, if you are familiar with churches or have been on church websites, citychurchotr.com is ours. But yeah, formation may not be on a lot of them. I think also it feels like a little like it's maybe getting some resurgence even in our culture, especially in the church culture. When you hear formation, what's kind of like your go-to thought?
Yeah, great question. I feel like maybe discipleship would be a word that's thrown around a lot.
That's good, yeah.
And I think it's similar, maybe even how we would define it would be the same thing. But I love, exactly what Tyler was saying. We're all becoming somebody, and we are saying it's not just enough to come to our Sunday morning gathering, or even, we're big fans of this house group, gathering in living rooms or in bars or parks all over the city. It's not even just enough to come to one of those. The goal is that we would start looking differently, or that we'd start living differently.
Yeah.
And we believe that, forming our lives and aligning our lives into the life of Jesus is worth it. It's the best thing that we can do. It's more than just, and Jesus believed certain things. Jesus had perfect theology. So we would love to really be shaping our theology and the way that we think. But I think that's stressed a lot in church, but is it like I'm also becoming more generous or more gracious, or I forgive quicker and deeper? Those are the things that we see in Jesus's life that sometimes you can say like, oh man, that was so great of him, and then just move on to studying the right thing or attending the right service. And I think we're saying, no, let's try to do both.
Yeah, I think this formation ties really well with mission, which was the second value that we talked about. Especially in not to tee you off, and I'll give this one to you, Chris, but if you think of the Great Commission, right? So how would formation work in light of the Great Commission?
Yeah, you are teeing me up because it's like that's the verse that we use for we got to baptize, we got to do evangelism, but it does say, Jesus does say, teaching them to obey all I've commanded, and it's like, well, seems like there's obedience involved. Seems like there is some kind of passing of information for the purpose of transformation. I should write that down.
What was that?
Passing of information for the purpose of transformation. Okay. And that's what he's saying. So it is this idea of we should tell them about Jesus, He did die for our sins. We are lost without him, and he came to give us the best life possible. But true discipleship or true obedience to the Great Commission, it sounds like, would be also like learning to obey the things that Jesus said or that the Bible in general has said, because that would have been what Jesus would have been referring to when he says teaching the commands.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, I know you've talked to me about this before, but and you mentioned it a little bit in your first answer, but I love when you talk about as we're growing and when we think about people's age. I mean, we're all still young, and so formation is obvious as you look at people as they age, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I joke all the time that I want to grow up to be Mr. Rogers. But I think what I'm, joking, I mean, in one sense, it's like I'm on my way because we're about the same weight. Just skinny, frail dudes. But I think one of the things, when I'm saying that, when I'm making that joke, it's like, here's someone that follows a full life journey. And think about all you would experience, all that people do experience, in 70 or 80 years. There's a lot. There's highs, there's lows, there's deep disappointments, there's big victories. And so when you get, further down a path, and so you see like an old Mr. Rogers, it's like, man, you've been through all the crap that comes with life. You've been through all the joy that comes with life. And you seem to have this disposition on the world that is so kind and gracious and generous, but firm. I mean, he was firm about what he thought should be on television. And you have this deep sense of conviction and all this beauty. It's like, of course, that's how I want to age. That's how I want to be. That's how I want to mature. And similarly, there's people that over time experience all the challenges of life and difficulties of life and other things and wouldn't wind up in that same spot. I mean, they've experienced the same bumps, or they've had similar, adverse and good experiences like Mr. Rogers had, but they didn't wind up in the same spot. And it's like, in my mind, it's like, what leads to the difference, or how do you get in a different way? And that's where like this focus on formation feels so critical to me, because it's like Mr. Rogers didn't become Mr. Rogers by accident. None of the great people that folks respect as heroes or would say I'd love to be like when I'm older get there on accident. It's always on purpose, and it's usually by following other heroes or other examples. So even in Mr. Rogers' case, I mean, he was a ordained Presbyterian minister and very much said, I want to be like Jesus on TV, and specifically with an audience in mind of children. And I think in the same way, it's like, man, I want to be like Jesus when I'm older too. I'd love to be less bothered by little things and more convicted about big things, and more kind and more caring and more focused on what matters most, and not as distracted and not as just, I don't know, easily consumed by just having more and wanting more and all the things that are so easy to be consumed with in like our sort of capitalist, commercialized world, but instead you focused on stuff that truly matters. And it's like, and I think I can, and I think we all can, and our church is doubling down and saying we want this to be a value as we go together, but like we can if we focus all along the way every year. It's like, man, what would Jesus do if he were me? What is a like loving response right here? What is a response that's going to form me to look more like Jesus ultimately? I mean, that's literally how you wind up to that place that then, when you get all the way down the road, in kind of the proof is in the pudding of your life, it becomes so apparent, man, I mean, you have become more and more like Jesus over time.
Yeah, I really like this as a value because it's one that it feels like, and maybe family would be similar with formation in this sense, that it's already happening in us as a church. We're partnering with people, because whether or not you're a Christian or you go to church or anything, you're being formed. Like what you're consuming, what you're reading, who you're with is forming you. And so I love the real partnership in the city, the partnership in the people, with formation being one of the values. And so, Chris, if there was, I don't know, some pastoral advice, and as you guys, the leaders, what would be ways that you would or what would be things that you would push people towards to form them?
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned from you, Tyler, is you're always talking about, and maybe you borrowed this from Mr. Rogers, but what do you want to look like when you're 70? And I've not thought about that until the last, few months and that would maybe, I mean, to answer your question in a long way, that would be the overarching question that I'm now asking myself. I do want to look more like Jesus. I do want to be more patient, but how do I have a 70-year-old version of me in mind instead of next year. And I think, part of that is, I think community is so big in this, or community or family or getting around other people, because I can do my best to go after 70-year-old Chris Marlin. And if I'm going the wrong direction just a little bit, I've got now 40 years to get really, really off track. And so I'm trusting, and I know you will, that you guys, other people in our church and our community will say, did you know that you're like not going the direction that you want to go? So first, you've got to, I think we've got to be in community, like real, authentic community that has the freedom to say, hey, I don't know if that's like the version of yourself that you want to be. But we also see in the life of Jesus that he did have, and this is not a popular word right now, but like he had discipline, or he had disciplines. Yep. Like he did pray. He quoted the Bible, or the Old Testament, which would have been his Bible at the time, more than, or a lot. So he obviously had been reading it, even memorizing some or all of it. Yep. He's always getting alone, but he was yet the greatest evangelist that's ever lived. So I think, and we've talked a lot about, what are the disciplines that like we need to lean into, and I think you just do that by looking at Jesus's life. Oh, he got away. Oh, he prayed. Oh, he spent time in worship. He spent time with other people. That would be probably the thing I'd lean into, is like, we've got to have some disciplines in our life to make us more like him.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch, because I was going to ask specifically like about disciplines. So for your two lives, what would be, and I think that these can change. So like right now, what are some disciplines that you're leaning into? Personally, I don't even think you need to make this inviting other people into, but yeah, what are your disciplines right now that are bearing fruit?
Also, I can think of a few that are really important. One is this like silence and solitude. We're just in a saturated world with information. So in one sense, this feels like the great challenge in our times, is like when there's a million sources of input and it can all come to you on your phone as soon as you wake up. What do you do to really connect with, again, as we were just talking about in presence, connect with God, to connect with kind of yourself, what's going on in there, to bring what's truly going on in your heart before God, to kind of get all that out in the open and see what tweaks you need to make. So like the silence and solitude piece is really, really huge. Another one for me that's fascinating is I do think like a generosity as a discipline is really important, or a discipline of generosity, sorry. In that, I don't know if I'm anything like you guys, but I get so many ads through Instagram and Facebook and email and everywhere I go, and it just is all designed, and it's not bad. Folks are doing their job. They're making you aware of products, but it's designed to make me feel like there's things I don't have, which is hilarious. Living in the country that we do, at the time that we do, where we're really just some of the wealthiest people to ever live on the planet, and yet I think still so discontent. And so a practice of generosity, of just like, hey, this money that I have, or these resources that I think I have, in my worldview, actually are like gifts from God, and they aren't just mine to use on myself, but I can use them on behalf of others, which doesn't mean I still didn't go to J. Crew and get this shirt, but does mean that I shouldn't be able to do that as frequently as I'd like, because I am giving money away, and it's good, and it's freeing my soul from just those little claws of more and more and more. I could rant on so many disciplines, all that to say, like, but that's the work the disciplines do. Yeah. It's like, it's small. It's like, man, giving this money away, that's really going to make you better. It's like, it will over 40 years. Totally. This is totally going to be the thing that hopefully when I get to be older, I'm not consumed by just buying the latest thing. It doesn't mean I can't have new things. It just means like it won't be most important in my life, because this discipline will help free me from that. And I'll be connected with who I am and who God is, because I'll have been quiet for a while in a loud world. So I know I want to hear your disciplines too. But those are, that's the kind of stuff that like the compound effect is amazing.
I'll let you preach on generosity all day long. I think it's a big miss in
and it's
spiritual
a discipline
disciplines.
You have too. I know. It's a journey we're both on, is maybe what I want to say.
Totally. Yeah.
We're both very trying to be conscious,
because
not
I think
being consumed by it.
Yeah, I think I'm naturally one of the most greedy, selfish people that I know. And so if I don't practice that discipline in a really strong way, I shouldn't be leading anything, much less a church. Yeah. The one that, as he was talking, it's like, you know what? I do love this idea of silence or I don't do it well. And I'm learning to love it. Because we're in this like pre-launch phase right now, and I'm still like kind of working this other job that I was doing before the church launched. I don't know if I've been busier right now, and it's making me lean into this first hour of my day. I've got this like rocking chair, or it's actually, I think it was like an old person chair, but it's where I sit for the first hour, and it looks different. I used to be even more regimented of like, well, it's Bible, then it's silence. And it's like sometimes it's just worship music for 45 minutes. Sometimes I read through a chapter of the Bible or a couple chapters, or I listen. But I have to have that time the more and more that I'm getting like busier and busier in the demands on my life. And the thing I need it for is as you both know, I'm incredibly emotional. It's a miracle. We're in episode 5. I haven't cried or yelled yet.
True.
So,
There's still
and
time.
not that those things are bad,
Yeah.
but I'm really trying to learn how to be a little bit just more like go with the flow, because my issue isn't like, oh, you've got to like turn up for this. Like I'll turn up, or I'll get passionate, but I want to learn how to let things go more. And if I don't have that first hour of scripture or quiet or silence, like you mentioned, I tend to not let my emotions I tend to let my emotions go a little bit more where they would want to go rather than what maybe Jesus would do in a certain situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys challenge me a ton because of the 4 that we've talked about values, formation is probably the hardest for me because I'm the opposite of you. I'm so go with the flow that I'll just consume, or I will just kind of coast, and then the next thing you know, it's been 5 years, been married for 5 years. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize that. And what's helped though is having my 2 little girls, because then it does keep me aware, because they're in such formative years, because their childhood is so short.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh wait, every conversation that I'm having with them is forming, and when my 3-year-old is feeling, instead of getting mad at her, tell her, hey, it's okay that you feel that, but we've got to respond a little bit better. And like I do that, and it's like I never thought I would approach an emotion like that, but then realizing that the formative years are not just the first 18 years of your life, that I'm still being formed, and that's really hard. So I think your guys' example is really helpful to me. So again, to kind of put down like logistics, even like formation as a value in our church. Again, all of these values, they're going to be vocal. We're going to share them. We're going to talk about them, and that's huge. But also, what does that mean? How are you going to actually practically move people towards formation?
Yeah, it's a big way we've talked about it is within this context of people meeting in homes, right? So a church with 2 front doors, homes really matter. One of the things we really want to do there is allow those smaller settings or smaller experiences of this family on mission. We want to allow those smaller settings to be a place where people both make a plan for formation, but then are also like held to that plan by the folks within their group. And so again, and I think people would get this if they've, maybe sense our ethos, or if they've heard other values. It's like, we're so against shaming. We're not trying to be heavy, in any way. But it's the kind of thing where it is helpful if someone says, hey, bro, you said you really, are working on this generosity piece, and yet,
you haven't given me your money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like, and how is that going? Or actually, we've noticed, you're buying a lot late, not long to buy, but how's this? Are you feeling okay? I mean, those kinds of questions that can happen in the context of family, in a safe place where you're not being judged. It's just people trying to help you become who you want to be, and you trying to help them become who they want to be, which is more and more like Jesus. It's like that seems to be the key. Having a kind of culture where there's, again, a group agreed plan and then a group holding each other to it. Seems like that's a huge thing that this will look like practically in our church, or a huge way that practically formation will occur in our church.
That's good.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I'm thinking about, if we're holding people accountable from like the pulpit, I don't think we'll have a pulpit, but from like stage preaching, that sounds a lot like shame and also terrible. Like if we called you out for whatever, and then you did it when you're leading worship. So I think it does happen in those homes. I mean, what happens in the living room, what happens with that smaller version of church that you're meeting with. And you hit on this, and I think I actually want to shift a bit. This doesn't go well or this does come across the wrong way. Not that there's an order to any of these values, but he said in the context of family, formation will work best in the context of family. So if you're brand new, we're not going to ask you, hey, like, did you do this? But if there's mutual trust, there's vulnerability. I mean, there's the things that we talked about in that first episode of family. It makes formation actually fun and reasonable, not just this top down, get in line with Jesus or get out, because yeah, that's not the kind of church that we want to be formed into.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I've always thought, and just when you're saying fun, Chris, or lively, it's like if I could get one tattoo, I mean, and I'm always...
Which you could, you can.
Well, I'm intrigued with the idea of a tattoo, but I've never thought, like, what would I want permanently on me? But this phrase could be it. This is the closest I've gotten to a tattoo phrase. But I really do believe that, like, we'll never regret a single decision we make to become more like Jesus. And that could be my tattoo. But that idea of, like, it's fun, it's lively. It's like, for me, the motivation is less like, because I'm so sucky, now I have to do these things to be, less bad. And it's like, no, it's like, you literally, like, you're not going to regret being more generous in 40 years. You just won't. You're going to be so glad that you're not going to regret being more gracious. You're not going to regret that you're not prone to anger. I mean, all these things, right? Being more like Jesus, like, you're just not going to regret it. So even though it's a little, it can feel tedious in the first stages, or it can feel like, man, is this really going to make my life better? It kind of sucks now. It's like just the long-term payoff. Like, you're not going to regret anything you do to become more like Jesus in the long haul. You'll be way happier about it. And so that, I mean, to your point where it's like, it's fun, it's in the context of family. It's like, yeah, I think when that becomes the motivator and less like bad Chris, bad Josh, bad Tyler, it's just like, look at this like fun journey we get to be on where decades from now, we're going to be like so fun to be around each other. We're going to be such a blessing to everyone we run into. It's like, that's what I want to be,
Amen. Man, this is so good. I love this. This is so fun.
This was fun.
Yeah, this is great. I hope that you guys, those of you that are listening, feel like you know us better, feel like you know our church better and our values. Our prayer, and I thought about praying right now. Actually, I think I'm going to after this. But we want to be more like those values, personally and as a family and our church, and that takes work and that takes commitment and passion. And so that's what we are going to invite people into, whether it's in our homes or whether it's at our church. And so we hope that comes off. We hope that humility comes off. And we really, I thank you for listening. I thank you for being intrigued enough to see what's going on in Cincinnati. Maybe you're somewhere far. Maybe you're right here and you saw our Instagram or our website and you're like, who are these people? What are they doing? I just thank you for listening and giving us the time. I am going to pray because we're a church and we believe in that. So, Lord, we thank you. I thank you for today and just these conversations that we've had about what City Church OTR is going to value. And I pray that we came off as humble, that we came off as authentic and real, not to win people to our church, but to just continue to grow this new kind of family that we are hoping and praying for in Cincinnati. Obviously, all four of these values are important to us. I'm sure they're important to a lot of people listening, and all of them need work and need next steps to make them better, because we want to be more like you. We want to experience your presence. We want to experience a family that you've given us with friends and radical friendship. And we also want to be on mission to bring your love and your character and your family to others, especially in Over the Rhine in Cincinnati. So thank you. To you we pray. Amen. Thanks again for listening.